Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hand Identity Dialogues webinar. I am Will Kreth, founder and CEO of Hand Human and Digital, and I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I want to thank especially our panelists who have taken time out of their busy schedules to join us in this conversation around identity and its evolving state in the media business and extensions into music and sports and other elements and areas as well too, from a representation standpoint. We've got a great set of panelists, and I want them to take a minute to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. And on my right on my screen, I've got Thomas Stilling, who is filling in for Mr. John Canning, who just got back from a long trip and he is not available for today's conversation. So we'll catch John another time. But Thomas, amazing last minute addition to the lineup. Thomas, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi there. So I'm a digital strategist and I teach AI and asset management at Rutgers University, including wonderful topics like governance, taxonomy, and metadata structures, everything that's related to hand. Worked at 21st Century Fox, where I got to know Will and some of this crew, and then spent several years running digital strategy at Forrester Research. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Thomas. And next up to my left from my screen, it may look different on other folks' screen, I see Caroline Giegerich. Caroline.
Hello. My name is Caroline, and I've spent over 20 years helping companies solve complex marketing challenges with emerging technologies, things like AR, VR, AI, at companies like HBO. Showtime is how I know Will originally, and Smashbox Cosmetics. Recently, I was at Warner Music Group as VP of Innovation there. We used AI in cases like creating video assets for artists to use in concert visuals, social assets for artists to use in creating awareness around artists, new album releases and things like that. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, Caroline. Sabrina's with our PR firm, Dowdy Ryan Communications. And thank you, Sabrina, for helping us today. Also, David Hughes, I see you there filling in ably for the great Paul Jessup, who is under the weather right now. So, David, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I spent my career in the music industry. I started at Sony and Sony Music. In the late 90s, I started the department at Sony Music to sell music on the internet, which we didn't know at the time, but meant that you had to spend a lot of time thinking about metadata. So my metadata history goes back 25 plus years. I moved from the RIAA about 18 years ago, from the Sony Music to the RIAA about 18 years ago, where I was head of technology. I was CTO there for many years. And again, in charge of things like oversaw the ISRC standards, DDEX standards, so metadata, messaging, all that same stuff. And then at the end of my tenure there, I started to really focus on AI. And after leaving the RIAA, I have continued to be very much involved in AI. I'm involved in a project called AI OK, which is essentially a trust mark for music products and services, sort of like a fair trade logo for music, I suppose, or something like that. And my other responsibilities are I'm the executive director for Coalition for Online Accountability. So I represent the major labels and the motion picture studios, primarily trying to deal with internet piracy, phishing, brand abuse, things like that. And we're focused on the domain name system, but everything on the internet. And so all those issues overlap with our discussion today. There we go.
Thank you, David. And Allan McLennan.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's nice to see. These are hard acts to follow. Trust me on this. It's hard, but I've been a part of the IP distribution of content world for almost 30 years, believe it or not. Back in the day, launching one of the first download to burn becoming streaming services back at the end of the 90s. That time, we were also just prior to that developing a 3D multi-user virtual world with Steven Spielberg. And at that time, having my identity being actually placed into the Visa Interactive Bank, the IBM Digital Library, and my entity of that, my avatar, is still alive and well in different parts of the world being used without my permission in different types of situations. So the hand identity discussion we're going to have today has close meaning to me on a number of different fronts. That is additionally to I was also the founding president of the AMI division for Rentrack with 100% of the studios and agencies in developing the kinds of content that we're wanting to find out about each individual actor, director, producer, all of that platform back in the day. The head of media and entertainment for Atos, 110,000 person group out of Paris. I was responsible for all of North America and South America and developing the different entities and development builds. And most recently, the recent president of 2G Digital Post, which is in Hollywood, which we're the posts that we're doing together, the verifying and versions of the different content that you see today on many of the distribution services as well as in theatrical. So localization, voices, mapping of faces, the interaction of the talent with the audience, 60 languages. And that's evolved into an AI component where we're able to do those different languages, but we still need a human touch. So the evolution of the IP distribution of content is something that I've been very close to for many years. And like David, I'm on a number of boards that address that throughout the industry. And I look forward to having this open discussion because I've known Will and his dedication and passion for this for many years and the creation of this concept. Well, one of those things I won't forget, that discussion in Amsterdam at IBC about 4 years ago when you had this and the development and the need of it. And today we have a greater need than we ever have had. And trust me, I look a lot different from 35 years ago as an avatar in Asia than I would today.
Well, you're frozen in time in a good way. Scott Perry, tell us about yourself.
Hi, so I'm Scott Perry. Presently, I'm the CEO of the Digital Governance Institute, but I have 40 years of experience, mostly as an auditor in the digital identity and internet trust area, as I've been a web trust auditor, which is an auditor to protect websites that the browsers use, as well as getting involved in identity ecosystems and auditing against NIST standards in identity. I am the co-chair of the governance stack working group of the Trust Over IP Foundation, which is an organization setting up a new architecture for internet trust layers for verifiable credentials that will be part of our discussion today around internet identity. So look forward to lively discussion today around the trends of identity and how we can use the hand identity structures to help have more verification and binding of identifiers to people.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's a little close to 10 after. Let's get into it. We got an hour to spend with everybody. And let's talk about our first phase of our conversation here, which is coming up in just a second. With regarding the current landscape and trends. Everybody see that slide up and trends for AI and talent? So we talk about emerging technologies and applications and the regulations we see with, for instance, Governor Gavin Newsom in California signing the bill in September around consent as a requirement for the creation of a digital replica of a legal and natural person. We start to see that there's a slow but steady catch-up game going on in government and with legislators and representatives at the state and national level or international level with regards to Europe, especially with their AI bill. And also want to talk a little bit about that and also talk about some market trends, talent education, With regards to insights from our advisors, I want to open the floor, and to get started with this, Thomas, I think you said, "Hey, this is really a hot topic with that I've been in conversation at conferences and sessions recently." Thomas, some top of mind thoughts as you look at to the point of the current landscape of things that you're seeing.
Yeah, no, what I thought was really interesting, Knowledge World, and at some creative and media conferences, literally in the last 3 weeks, is that the need feels like a tipping point. Even humans who don't traditionally think about talent IDs, they don't think about authenticity, are getting a lot of direction from stakeholders and from their senior leaders, asking them, how do we do this? How do we do this? And you can tell that there's a lot of energy around this topic, partially because of the numbers of people that are, I'm going to say flocking. And yes, believe it or not, people flock to governance and metadata and data conferences nowadays, but really interested in this topic and understanding authentic talent in ways that maybe we didn't envision. You know, I know when we first started talking, we focused on studios, we focused on film and TV, we talked more about gaming, but once you go into advertising and some of the other tracking, you feel this surge. And I think for the use cases that have been talked about on some of the webinars Hand has sponsored, they're really resonating. And it was fascinating being in DC and having someone come up and ask and say, hey, how do you ID things? We don't even know where to put it. And I think one of the learnings from that is not only is the ID and the concept of authenticity really important, it's where do you put that into your ecosystem and into the metadata? And the fact that so many people were being thoughtful on where this would live, to me, was a real sign of the energy around the topic.
Thank you. Definitely top of mind. Someone sent me yet another email about Sir David Attenborough's voice being cloned this morning. I've received several. The Guardian wrote a piece about it. Scott Perry, I want to reach out to you just regarding this area. And when Thomas talks about where to put that provenance information, because I think that's the word. I love how the art world of Sotheby's and Christie's has moved into the digital identification world, at least from a vernacular, at least as far as a language story regarding, like, where did this come from? What's the provenance of this object, this file, this face, this data type? Scott, what are some of the thoughts and the conversations you're hearing?
Yeah, so there's a lot of trends in moving towards creating more digital verification about who we are, so that we can project accurately that we are who we say we are on the internet. And the containers of where, you know, that information is going to be delivered on what's called verifiable credentials. And there's been a movement around that. You're going to see it more closely around starting with driver's licenses. There's many states that are implementing digital driver's license that encapsulates who you are as a driver, and that credential can be verified that it came from your state Department of Transportation. And that verification and use of cryptography around that can be used as a container for a variety of different artifacts that define who you are. So an employer can say that you worked for the company and make a claim that can be verified. Universities can say about degrees and certifications that you get. You can get, you know, the DOA hand ID that can be encapsulated in that and can be verified that it came from an authorized issuer. And so those are the movements around that, but it needs to be in a secure location. And there's a lot of work that's happening in the EU to create a smart wallet, which is very secure, that can contain that private information and allow more control for the individual to give out information about their private information that they want to, and they control as they deliver it. And the other factor that's coming about is a unique credential called personhood to address the AI, so that I can demonstrate that I am a person as opposed to an AI engine going through, and that can prove more that I am an authentic individual making claims about certain activity.
One of the things that you're bringing up really, really straightforward is the ability today that we're able to really create misrepresentation out into the marketplace of who and what and where. Drilling down, Scott, specifically to what you just said, when we're able to have that kind of identity factions when it comes to wallets and whatever are in our wallets and our digital wallets is critical for us. But, recently for all of us going out in the marketplace, it comes down to, is what we're seeing real? Is it true? And this is something that is, surprisingly was actually in a conversation for me here in the States this past weekend with the Thanksgiving weekend with family. And in the conversations around the table, it was actually brought up, well, I really wasn't really believing that it was real, what was being presented. And I don't know about you, but over many decades of us being engaged and involved with the digital connections, I've never heard anyone actually outwardly with a 94-year-old mother-in-law saying, I don't know if it's real. Wow. Okay, here we come. Like there's 34 million digital deep fakes a day that are being pushed out on the IP networks. And we'll just say OTT, streaming, whatever it might be. And this came into really great play, playing really strong into David's and Scott's comments. This past year, and Will was a part of it with Hand Identity, we pulled in with what's known as the International Broadcasting Conference, IBC, the accelerator group, where we really delivered a full-on project for close to 9 months on disinformation, misrepresentations, verification. There's a tremendous organization that Scott is a part of with C2PA, which, that comes back to this point of when you see something. Now, let me tell you, trying to wrangle a bunch of executives in news from around the world, where the news within broadcasters is the revenue generator. Everybody's trying to beat each other to the breaking news. Well, now that breaking news has another level, and that is it real? And so when it comes down to it, this point of, for all of us seeing something, even today within this broadcast that we're talking within this webinar, is it real? Are we true? Well, bottom line of it is C2PA has something that if you look down in the right-hand corner, you'll see a little bug down there that says verified. And so when that content goes to whoever the online editors are to be able to capture that information, it's verified. That means the person's been mapped, the person is real, and the content is correct. And so this effort, as Scott was pointing out, we are finally, I believe, to the tipping point. We've been playing in this game for a long time. And yes, some notables have now been having their voices cloned or their presence cloned, whatever it might be. But until it happens to you, you really don't know the impact that takes place or the work that you're doing that's misrepresented out in the marketplace. So identity is becoming a critical need that we're having to do. And I'm looking forward to having us peel back the onion on this call to really drill into how we're doing it.
I think what you said and picking up on what Scott said is really important, because what you're saying is that identification becomes even more important when it gets down to the individual level, like i.e. me, you, all of us here. And I've seen this as a trend starting to pick up steam. Particularly a notable event for me was when the Orb premiered, which is the eye scanning technology that then like identifies you as like proof of human. But why that was such a big moment for me in terms of news was that it started to get at the fact that we are all going to care about identification, and not just, big actors and stars, but we're all going to worry about it, because I don't know about you, but I use facial detection on my phone all day, every day. And so if there are miscreants out there recreating my visual identity and using that, that actually could start to get really hairy for all of us as individuals who are using that identification like 10,000 times a day on our personal devices. So I think that shift from, oh, that's just a Tom Hanks problem to, uh-oh, wait, that's a all of us problem seems to be starting to sort of, matriculate out in the news sphere.
How many times have we seen someone say, there's a fake account of me on Instagram, please ignore it. I've already tried to get a takedown. They've stole my account, my images. They're pretending to be me, right? And that and does that get, how does that element get changed in a world where it's already kind of a annoyance? As it becomes better and better, does it become something where it has to have rules or legislation or ways to provide ways to say what's real and what's not from a detection standpoint and a provenance standpoint?
Yeah, and I think you highlight the risk around this just as a thought. The other part of it, I don't want to lose sight of it, is also the opportunity. And I think for identifiers on a very practical level, you are enabling authentic findability, to sort of like add a phrase to findability. You're enabling use cases, you're enabling confidence. And one of the things I don't want to lose sight of, in this sort of came through and comes through in the governance class at Rutgers, is that usually the students are split half in organizations that are risk adverse and seeking to protect, and the other half that are seeking to enable. This is a business enabler because of that confidence, and I don't want to lose that thread.
Thank you, Thomas. So here we are now at 23 after, so I want to check in with our slide agenda. And if anyone has more comments on that, please let me know. But let's see here.
Well, I wanted to say one more thing about, where we're at. So, we've been 25 years with the internet, and it has evolved into a very anonymous source of where the data is coming from. So we do not have confidence about the source of transactions, and we lack the trust and the confidence that even when something is portrayed to come from something, we don't have the trust. So it takes a larger effort to kind of build it back. And what it requires is really, actions using cryptography to bind activity to individuals, and individuals have to be responsible for the claims that they make, on the internet. And the way to do that, and the way that is going about, is using cryptography and also using biometrics, because those are the aspects that tie transactions to folks, as well as the ability to verify using cryptography that it actually came from individuals. And so new technology being, presented to a lot new people. So there's an education issue associated with it. There's privacy concerns around our other factors using that data appropriately. And so it does create a body of work that's needed in order to create that trust back.
Yeah. I would like to add to that, Scott, that while you and I sit on C2BA conversations and you're helping drive a lot of the work around conformance and bringing together disparate groups of companies and super smart people around this issue of the challenge and struggle around provenance with C2PA's contra-credentials as part of that story with cryptographic metadata, watermarking, fingerprinting. I would also like to say that the companies that are doing terrific work, really yeoman work around deepfake detection. We have some friends in the industry, whether they be a place of Reality Defender or an identifier, and so many companies. Some of them are mentioned in a new article that just came out yesterday in Variety VIP around generative AI and deepfakes and digital replicas. That's a piece by writer and analyst Audrey Schomer of Variety. We are mentioned in it. Full disclosure. Got a little plug in there for hand, in addition to some of the companies I just mentioned. And so it's a time where it's very top of mind from business leaders and industry experts who are looking at ways to provide an operationalizing method for the now legal requirement of digital replicas to have the consent of from the person, from the legal and natural person. So, so Scott, I wanted to then take us to the next element here and say in our key challenges for talent identification, authentication, monetization. For the discussion here to talk about proposal solutions and opportunities for improvement. Allan, your hand is up, and I'm so glad you raised your hand because I was gonna call on you next.
Yeah, well, it's like before we get over to Scott, I just kind of want to bring it back to like a sense of reality here. Or the fact of it is that human nature will always take advantage of others, no matter what it is, if they think that they're going to gain something from it, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional or ego. And the problem that we have on all of this, and we've been facing it for decades with pirating of content, is the repercussions really aren't there. It's like when someone puts something up that's pirated, they might get sued by some sort of network around the world, but to capture or to actually collect on that suit, they just evaporate in the thin air. And so there's nothing that holds anyone away from doing what they have just done. This is the same that occurs within identity. Until we come down to a point where there's actually ramifications and some sort of, to Scott's point, the ability to actually lay that ill on top of that individual, and then if they get 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits, they're out. Well, how then do you control that IP address? How then do you control that group that's misrepresenting an individual out in the marketplace? We have to come to identifying it through hand identity is really key. That's the first step in really getting this all together in some sort of basis of being held accountable for what you have done. And we're still a ways from that when it comes from the legalities and the governance of all of this. And that is something that we're hard at work worldwide in trying to address. So it's a multiple point type of a factor right now that has become very prevalent in our marketplace.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, I mean, you're talking about some strategies, and it's all around transparency and accountability. So you're mentioning the C2PA. The C2PA specification is all around making claims, statements that I took a picture, I edited a picture, I used AI, and having those claims verified in a way that creates confidence. And that's not only for just digital objects, but it is claims in making work products, which are very essential into the usages of NIL and hand identity. I did this piece of work and it was attached to me, and it can be verified that it came from me. So we need to create that ecosystem where people can make claims, and that those claims can be verified with confidence. And the way to do that is to create, structures called governance frameworks, where when claims are made, you can see what went into the claim, how much confidence that you could get into claims that are being made, and so that the public can gain, an overriding confidence into claims and verification processes. But we're in its infancy to do that, but the technology is there, and the governance now is moving forward very quickly, especially it's in the EU with new legislation, and that's another topic, which is driving countries in the EU to implement smart wallet technology and the ability to make these claims on the smart wallet that can be done with confidence.
Will, could I jump in with an opportunity for digital replicas?
Bring it.
So one of the things that I do now that I've sort of pivoted outside of music and I'm running my own company is I support Scott Galloway's ed tech company. It's called Section. Basically, they're like mini sprints of MBA-like content, many courses around AI, shocking, but true. And now what they've been doing, and I've been watching this firsthand, is they're doing digital replicas of the professors. The reason for this is because AI moves pretty freaking quick, as we're all noticing and discussing on this call. It moves so quick that by course by course, they have to update the content because that's how fast it's moving. So instead of getting everybody back into a production and shooting it, they'll have digital replicas that can be easily updatable. They're pretty good. They're all done by HeyGen, if anyone's wondering. Now, if I used HeyGen, which I have on my own, it looks awful, but because they're doing a professional recreation, it looks amazing. The other thing they can do really quickly is they can translate it into other languages so they could globalize the content really quickly, and all without getting professors back into a studio. So just going to your point, Thomas, where it's not all doom and gloom, we're all not going to die. There are lots of opportunities when there's ethical uses of digital replicas. And I just wanted to give one. Once I heard your comment of like, yes, no, there is a positive runway here for good things.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you.
I just have to see Professor Scott Galloway speaking perfect Mandarin or Japanese. His replica, of course.
Yeah,
Well,
or for
and
some
now
of us,
there's a
English.
Prof AI. So like instead of, there's literally a GPT of him that's literally just giving students feedback all the time, not just as a video, but as a GPT as well.
The embodiment of his probabilistic answers. Well, that's great. So yeah, with regards to the licensing story, I think that's a question I want to put to folks like David and to Allan and to Thomas. When it comes to the kind of the consent-based chain of custody licensability, the AI rights, if you will, of one's identity. Anyone have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, sure. I've got some. So we're seeing these. It's a little bit of a tangent, but in the music industry, most recently, we've seen a couple of big instances of AI creation. For example, some of you may have heard Brenda Lee's "Rocking Around the Christmas Tree" in her young voice, singing in Spanish rather than English. That was done with her full permission. But the fact that we're able to do that shows, the opportunity and the threat, of course. So it would be great if every time that happens, that it would be a quick and easy way for us to determine who did it and how and so on. And implementing C2PA in music is a little bit more complicated than photography, so it's going to take us a little while, but maybe that's what we're going to have to go down that road. I think there's a lot of opportunity here. Oh, another example people may not be aware of is that Randy Travis this past fall released a new single, and he had been unfortunately stricken with a stroke and unable to sing the way he used to. But he was able to go into the studio and using AI recordings, AI trained on recordings of his own voice, he was able to manipulate the system to make it sound the way he wanted to, which he can no longer do with his own vocal cords. And so things like that would be wonderful for people to know that that's authentic and see the provenance on that. And I think there's these might be niche cases, but I think it starts to build confidence if people can see the same way with the C2PA. If you can scroll over and see the provenance, people will start to gain a certain confidence in the system. And I think it will shine a light on the non-consensual uses of all of these things. And that's what we really need to do. We need to make the great divide, so to speak.
You raise a really good point, David, and that is, with Randy Travis, truly amazing to watch what he went through and how they put that together and pulled it together. But it seems like it always comes back to whether or not he is, with that release out in the marketplace, is going to generate any revenues from it. And that's part of the issue that has been affecting all of us when it comes to misrepresentation, is until it actually has there's commercial damage, there seems not to be any kind of real call to arms on it. These are tremendous examples, being able to use AI for the good. Yesterday, I went through a workshop through the Academy, and we're looking at some different audio types of formatting software that truly was astounding with what it could possibly put into play, and that is just it. It would play whatever musical instrument you had, whatever octave that the singer was being able to pull together, and whatever lyrics that you either had the AI platform write or that the writer would have. This all comes back to who owns the rights, and the rights of this, if it's a finished product by an artist that then's put into a versionized number that's accounted, whether it's within IDMB or whatever kind of management system platform, it's something that really doesn't capture the kind of need that we need to have when it comes to production. Every time AI touches something and creates a new version number for it, that version number now no longer belongs to the content creator. It belongs to whoever the version owner of it is. So until there's some laws that are put into place that can control that kind of versioning. Now that's for the legitimate distribution of licensing.
And just to add, Allan, while you're talking, because I was on that same Zoom, you're talking about a company that's currently being sued by all big three music companies. The one that we were on yesterday, it's being sued by all three.
Yeah, it was astounding, wasn't it, Caroline?
It was astounding, but
it was amazing what they were producing.
It was also interesting because they're being sued, and the way that he talked about it was like, "But I'm a musician. I'm a musician, so don't hate me." It was kind of funny.
Right. And this is where we're coming back to. The suit is because it's an infringement on the overall products that are being created to be distributed. And there's a revenue stream that the record companies are recognizing that this could do damage to. And so they need to stop it as soon as they possibly can. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not able to be done. And to this point, it comes back to how we manage this that's pushed out into the market. Like we talked about on other discussions, those numbers, those version numbers, actually we're fighting right at the moment within the legal system that when a pirate touches something and it's put out, they actually own that content now because it's a new version number. In years past, it was just a golden master that was replicated and distributed. And in different cultures around the world, that kind of replication was known as sharing with family members. And so we could go down a rabbit hole here on what's right or what's wrong. The bottom line of it is when it comes to inappropriate use of certain content that has been misshaped, misrepresented out into the marketplace, and that there's money being made from it, that's where there's the problem and issue. And so that, I believe, what we're starting to find out is very real. Like I mentioned earlier, just the 34 million deep faked videos a day that are being done, that's pretty massive. And when it comes to this, every eyeball is going on every one of those, and that there's an impression that's then attached to whatever is attached to it, advertising, personality. There's an erosion of revenues for someone out into the marketplace. So this is where it's catching traction right at the moment. And I know David has been on this for a period of time, as well as Scott.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say that there's one big difference in that we went through a period of time where the sharing got to the point where there was more sharing than actual purchasing of music.
Yeah.
Roughly, roughly in the early 2000s, about 2/3 of the music, maybe more, that was consumed was not paid for. I think we're seeing a different shift now in that when people are not listening to the original version or the original artist, in many cases, they're actually on another platform that's monetizing it. So rather than nobody getting paid, a different party's getting paid, which is a serious problem, but in some ways is a better problem to deal with. So
how do you deal with that problem? What's the best way?
Well, I mean,
for the music industry, considering I remember years ago learning at the music industry, I gave a talk on metadata, and I asked them, I said, well, how well do you track rights? I didn't know the music industry as well. They said, we can slice a penny 1,000 ways. And I think that the tipping point that you're talking about, Allan, is is coming soon. Like if you go back just a little bit and you think about fake photos, inauthentic, and like all the images that just go out with no identifier, many legal departments in different industries, think hotel chains or advertising, legal departments almost think of it as like a cost of business. It's like the Amazon truck with 1,000 parking tickets on it. Until it really stings and start really impacting the revenue and hurting their operating, costs, whether it's upside or, whichever way you look at it, that's when it's going to get interesting. And I think now you're at the point where you're seeing some of that revenue opportunity slip away, and then companies start looking at it differently.
Yeah.
But some of the companies that are actually going
Is that
after
AI
deep
generated,
fakes-
Allan?
Yeah, I think that sounds like an old school cell phone. But what's interesting is one of the companies I was talking to
Talking
last
about
week,
my wife.
they acknowledged that they were experimenting with quote unquote deep fakes. They're doing simulated stuff and they're doing it in sandboxes and they're working on it. So you've got this really interesting dynamic of there's a lot of unknown actors in the marketplace creating certain inauthentic or deep fake items, but there's also large companies that are now looking to gain business in creating this. And you've used some of the examples here, but I think this is the tipping point year where both cost and opportunity are going to start convincing legal and finance departments to start asking questions to their other stakeholders.
You know, you raised the key point right there, and that is, until you get to that tipping point, and you're right, cost of doing business, and that came back to digital representations of content and pirating, and then it's like retail. It's between 3% and 4% loss at any given time on any given product. Well, in today's Hollywood, 1% makes a big difference, and so this is caught tremendous attention to this, both from the pirating standpoint, the digital identity standpoint, the misrepresentative assigned actors to contracts, and areas that can have an overarching damage to the revenue flows right now of the studios and the content creators and the producers. So to your point, Thomas, the time seems to be, and we've seen this before over the years when things are coming together to address a problem. I believe we are getting to a degree of recognition that that's going to be needed. Caroline, one of the more interesting things that you've been dealing with, especially in the advertising area, that I find really fascinating, this is becoming extremely real. And if there's false offers that go out into the marketplace that are incorrect, that have a link on the screen or on the laptop that directs someone to purchasing something, is that becoming really now? I mean, it always has been massive, but is it now becoming extremely real?
Yeah, so, in the point I just wanted to summarize around what you guys were talking about is, AI is going to, and it is already perpetuating a huge content, addition to the populate, okay? And so, but it brings on deception. And that's when the line gets crossed. So we mentioned about consent is required. Rights need to be clearly identified. Fairness needs to be addressed by the legal community to deal with what is original and what's plagiarism, right? And so it gets down, we need to nail down what these are before we can create the appropriate traceability for money payments, especially in the media. Digital rights around music is broken right now, and getting traceability to content songwriters and is broken, and we need to get that in. Now when we blur AI in, we need to, that will be even more difficult. And so all media needs to get the rules set up more clearly so that participants know what claims they are making when they're using AI resources.
One thing to say about AI, and I heard this is the opportunity part again, is back at Code last year. Robert Kinsel, who is the CEO of Warner Music Group, came and he spoke. And it started in my mind this narrative, which I think is the right one. In 2007, YouTube launched Content ID. And what that basically did is it matched whenever uses of music were included in YouTube videos and then paid back rights holders, right? So it was, let's not try to beat the internet. Let's not try to literally send a takedown to every YouTube creator in existence, but let's instead just try to get paid. And what Robert talked about last year at Code for the first time, and frankly, I worked at Warner Music Group and I had never heard him speak about this internally, but he started talking about, I want to call it an AI content ID and this is something that, the industry is working on is, okay, if you want to use our libraries for your training data, cool. We're not going to try to beat you. We tried that once with like the whole Napster era, and that didn't turn out well for us. So instead, we're going to try to figure out a way that everybody can get paid. But the issues are massive, right? And ID is a big part of this. It's, okay, well, what percentage did that SZA song play versus the Sly and the Family Stone song versus the, Rolling Stone, whatever? That's the hardest part of the nut to crack. But I think identification and technology will be at the key of sorting this out, and it will come. And then everybody will calm down a little bit when they start to get paid.
You raised a really interesting point, Caroline, and I'm just going to take it to another side. This is from the commercialization of music from the record companies, like what you're just saying with Warner. But then there's other groups that have thrived on misrepresentation of their music. For example, the Grateful Dead. And their entire culture has been based around bootleg music and other bands that have represented their styles of music out in the marketplace. And instead of trying to constrict that, they've promoted it, because in many ways it's promoting their music out to be the real deal. So, to try to go to a Dead concert, no matter if you like them or not, it's pretty astounding the amount of people that are there, that many are throwback to a different time. But the bottom line of it is that they all have their phones going and they all replicate it and they all push it out now. Why? It's because that community is open for sharing of different kinds of content. And I think that's a component that we haven't discussed in the industry as all. It's like, what's ours, what's mine, and how do I keep it, versus turning it around and actually releasing it so groups and individuals can actually prosper from it, because ultimately they will benefit in some capacity of what they've made back to the band as a business. So that's just, I'm just throwing it out there, but that doesn't take away the inappropriate replication of their music, like any other band that could be misappropriated out in the marketplace. But I just you opened up something there. I just wanted to put that other side that's embraced, that it's okay. And, and in some ways, when someone's calling somebody out, it's okay, because they're bringing attention to whoever that individual is in some capacity. But we're at that point.
Well,
I want to add that to what Allan said. If you're an entity, whether you're a performer or a franchise, and lucky enough to have a fan universe around your intellectual property, whether it be the Dead or the Marvel Cinematic Universe or DC or Potter, that's an amazing thing. And so replication is going to happen as a kind of a virality that's kind of a network effect that is good and has been fostered and encouraged over the years, not squashed. Star Wars used to sue people over mashups of Remember the Troops video. Those days have long gone by, where fan universes create incredible brand value around the IP of an entity or a franchise or a product or a look at what our Thanksgiving weekend, Moana 2. Hello. I mean, you couldn't even predicted that, right? So, David.
Yeah, but it all depends on your business model. So, the Grateful Dead is not in the recorded music business. They were in the live business. So they basically gave away all their music, meaning the recordings from every concert, as an advertisement for the next concert.
Mhm.
An advertisement for the next concert. And that's a business model that worked great for them. But
Initially,
it couldn't work for everybody, right?
yeah, initially it was that, but now it's all IP.
We've got 10 minutes or 9 minutes, and I want to see if there's any questions.
Good
If
point.
folks on the session, I'm looking for in the queue to see if anyone wants to ask any questions, and open this up to the folks listening in case if you have questions, please submit them through the Zoom chat, and we'll answer as many as we have time for. But until I see some more questions in the queue, I'm looking for Sabrina. If you see any, let us know. I'm not seeing it yet, but yeah, I think that's key there. We'll talk about how the opportunity around representation and identity, having that chain of custody, the provenance story, recapping some of the things we talked about on today's call, the systems and methods and the tools and techniques, as Scott Perry talked about earlier, for attesting to the authenticity of the work and the creator are only going to get better in a world also where you know it's a cat and mouse game, right? There's going to be that whack-a-mole element of, can we trust what we see, to Allan's mother-in-law's point over Thanksgiving turkey? Can we trust what we see? And who are the helpers and what are the signals we'll be looking to look for, whether it's C2PA contra credentials or whether it's other elements of ways to provide trust but verify, right? The old saying, trust but verify. How do you inject more trust in the system, but provide verifiable credentials to provide that element of confidence that you know who you're dealing with or what you're seeing is from the original source, primary sources. Any other thoughts, folks, as we wind down to the last glide path of the last 7 minutes here? Scott?
Yeah, what's endemic to this discussion is that people are now becoming brands. And because of Web 2, we have, influencers and we have followers that create monetary value in a community. And so money will drive a lot of the advancements here, because there's a need to protect if I'm an influencer, my relationship with my community. So you want more authentic communication from the influencer, and people want to know that it came from me, because it is very fragile if bad things are said and claims made that I didn't make, right? That can be detrimental to the monetary asset that I've created over time, as well as the work, the book of work that I do. I need to be able to protect that and hold on to that, and also defend against AI influences of that. And so we need to create that landscape of fairness and control of things that we say in the digital marketplace.
Thank you, Scott. Absolutely. We have one question here that's just come in. Jonas says, does the manipulation of voices into other languages fall into Han's arena if someone speaks Mandarin, but it's AI generated, for instance, an example given there? With regards to that, that's a great question. To answer that one live, I would say still early days with regards to misrepresentations from language perspectives. Again, it's about the source, the voice likeness, and protecting that voice likeness will be no trivial task. We're talking with companies right now that are leaders in the voice likeness business, and there are multiple ways. Scott mentioned cryptographic metadata about the ways to attest to the voice and its provenance and where it comes from and what it was trained on, right? What was the training data? And I think that's going to be increasingly, but not just from a forensic proof of source, proof of the chain of custody story, but also from a rights and licensing and monetization story as far as where the training data comes from. Allan, you have something to say?
Yeah, I can dive in on this a little bit because of this prior few years of dealing with linguists around the world. To answer your question, it all depends on this has been going on for decades as far as subtitling and dubbing of voices and localization of content. It always comes back to whatever the content's relationship is with the talent and whether they get compensated for each one of the versions that are being created. And I know from you're asking that question, I'm sure you're very aware of that. These tools are already in place when it comes to the manipulation of the other voices and the mapping of those voices for dubbing. It is pretty amazing that you can just press buttons and put in 5-year-old boy, 12-year-old girl, whatever it might be, and it'll take the language and immediately put it into Mandalay or Mandarin. This kind of voice manipulation for dubbing is real, but it's also part of the licensing. It's also part of the compensation back to the actor, which is part of the SAG-AFTRA agreement that we just fought through for the last 110 days, which crippled Hollywood. But in this particular instance, it just did take place, and it's very real. The point here I'm making is that is all done with a technical layer. And so with Han's identity capabilities, it is not a difficult feature to be able to integrate into it if there is a current artist that is in the Han library that needs to have this being rectified in some component. So maybe not here right now, but not off the design board at this time.
We have thank you, Allan. We have one more question in the last couple minutes here. Cam Gear asks, can we dig a little bit more into the training data in relation to California Assembly Bill 2013, which went into law September, where training data manifest will be required for a generative AI product service company with enforcement which will be beginning in January 2026. Does anyone have a take on that with regards to that bill that went through the California legislature?
Well, no, but whether it's the bill or whether it's designed or whether it's being implemented, I think that's a multifaceted kind of question on that. But, I am not aware of how that training data in relation to AB 213 that now has been put into play here in California.
Just if you're hearing about like what folks are talking about it, or
yeah, Gavin signed it. It was a big deal. I actually publicized it out into the market. So it's a good step. It's a good stage. How it's being executed, there's a number of different firms and organizations that are trying to do it right now.
Sounds like the devil or God.
I don't know who.
On how that gets executed. We're near the top of the hour, and I want to thank everybody here for attending and for your thoughts and your contributions and your subject matter expertise as this open-ended question around identity and talent and representation and licensing and AI and trust is not going anywhere. It's going to be around today, tomorrow, next week, a year from now. But we're so glad to have a way to check in and get a snapshot of what's happening. So I want to go around and say a big thanks to Caroline Giegerich and Allan McLennan and Dave Hughes and Scott Perry and Thomas Stilling. Any last thoughts or parting words from the panelists?
Be authentic.
I think AI is friend, not foe.
Not foe. Scott?
I think
this has been a great first conversation. I think that there are more conversations to have. And so wanted to thank Will for getting all of us together and starting the dialogue, which is really a great step to addressing issues.
And next time we can just use our virtual avatars. We don't even have to come to this.
And from my personal experience, my avatar being in the ether for 30 years, it's not all bad. I do get some good responses from time to time.
That's good. Well, thanks everybody. And for those of you who might subscribe to Variety VIP, the new article, Generative AI Deepfakes and Digital Replicas, is out now by Audrey Schomer. Give it a look, give it a read if you haven't seen it yet. Looking forward to hearing from folks. And this will be recorded. We posted on our website and our YouTube channel. Thanks, everybody. And once again, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Cheers now.